This video is going to discuss overload options for overload champions in Season 23. Since we now have the artifact mods, or they've revealed them, you can sort of have a look at what's going to be good next season in a sense for champion damage. So this video is only for outgoing champion damage via a pulse rifle, via the mod overload pulse rifle. This season it's overload hand cannon, as you can see, but next season it's going to be overload pulse rifle. There's going to be overload auto, but I'm not looking at overload auto at all. Overload auto rifle is actually a worse mod than overload pulse rifle, just because how inconsistent the mod is. It's better than what it used to be, and it is good with Quicksilver Storm, and it is good with Sweet Business. But outside of those two options I've just told you, maybe the Root of Nightmares auto, it's good with that as well. But outside of those things, Overload Auto Rifle just isn't it. So you want to be using Overload Pulse Rifle, in my opinion. Now, I know we've got Le Monarch, we've got weapons with inbuilt overload, we've got divinity when you're in a fire team, you've got all that stuff. Let's just forget about those for a minute. What pulse rifles would you use in Season 23 to be effective solo against champions? So that's what this video is covering, and we can test it in game right now. So I'm not conning you or scamming you. We can actually test it right now in the game, because there's a little exotic on the Warlock called Secant Filaments that gives you overload rounds on any weapon that you choose. You can actually test overload rockets now in the game, because you can get overload rocket launcher, which we are getting next season. But that, I'm not going to go into that right now for this video. I might make a video before next season saying about overload rockets. We'll see. I don't know. But for now, let's talk about the pulse rifles. So this states Devour and Rift. Casting Empowering Rift will grant you Devour. Right, that's nice. Damage dealt by you and your allies from within your Empowering Rift will disrupt combatants. So you can get Overload Pulse Rifle already. Overload any weapon you want. Which, I'm not saying that you have to use this next season because you're going to have the mods, but it is a nice thing to run anyways. But I'm just saying that this is how we can test Overload Pulse Rifle with these boots. No other class has this, of course. So now that we know that, what can we talk about first? Well, the tests will be at the end, so if you're more interested in the test, they'll be time-stamped. But before I talk about exotic pulse rifles, I want to talk about legendary pulse rifles, and I didn't test many of them. The reason why is because I don't need to test them, because I know I've tested basically the best pulse rifles in the game. The two best legendary pulse rifles for the legendary slot, right? So I'm not talking about exotics, I'm talking about legendary pulse rifles. The best two in the game, in my opinion, are kinetic ones, and they roll with a perk called Kinetic Tremors. Now, the reason why Kinetic Tremors is the best pulse rifle legendary perk is because when you have overload rounds to your pulse, Kinetic Tremors is counted for that, so it'll give you additional stun damage to the champ, very much like Explosive Payload in a sense, but it's actually far more complex and unique about that. There's a couple of people made some videos about Kinetic Tremors because it's a very complex enhanced perk. Alright, it's very complex, but all you need to know is that it's effective on champion damage solo. So, because legendary pulse rifles aren't really that good in high-end PVE, I don't really recommend you using pulse rifles for champions. That's the legendary slot, unless you have a Kinetic Tremors one, or maybe vorpal. But even then, vorpal's only 20. It's a 20% increased damage, but there's no area of effect damage with vorpal. Kinetic Tremors has a lot of things going for it, so it's better on a pulse rifle to run Kinetic Tremors than vorpal. So therefore, that's why I'm saying I haven't tested any other pulse rifle apart from Kinetic Tremors, because any other pulse rifle that doesn't have Kinetic Tremors is objectively worse for champion damage. I know that without having to test it. I don't need to test it. Do you get it? I don't need to show you that, because I can tell you it's worse objectively. So for the legendary slot, the only pulse rifles you want to use, I would say that the pulse rifles that roll with Kinetic Tremors, the only two that I'm aware of, right, is Battle Scar and Chatroom Bone. Battle Scar I bought off the gunsmith. I believe it's in the world loot pool. I don't know if it's gone. I don't know the situation with it. I haven't actually looked at that. I'm just thinking about it now. But I'm just saying, Battle Scar's fantastic. And it's also got the origin trait field tested, which just gives more reload. I've got a alloy mag. This is just the roll that I had. Perpetual motion, which you know that I like in PvE. People think it's a PvP perk, but it isn't just PvP. It's also good in PvE. But it's got Kinetic Tremors. I obviously put major spec when I do the tests, because you get the 8% extra damage. But what's better than Battle Scar? Well, better than Battle Scar would be a craftable Chatron Bone. Craftable Chatron Bone essentially is like literally on my top list for legendary pulse rifles against champions, and you're going to see in the test that it nearly competes with an exotic pulse rifle, which is insane because exotic pulse rifles do more damage. So those are the best two. Other pulse rifles that I just had some random pulse rifles in my vault. I'm not a big pulse rifle user, not these days, because pulse rifles aren't effective, but I had a new purpose. This is good for champions. I've got another one in my vault that has adaptive munitions. This is good for barrier champs. It's not anti-barrier pulse rifle. So what's the point? Doesn't matter. We've got radiant anyways to stun champion barriers. So looking at this, like if you get a good new purpose, it's not this one that you're looking at. It's in the vault. It's a high impact frame. High impact frames are good in PvE. So you need to look at the frame of your pulse rifle. So high impact frames, the 340 RPM are good in PvE because they hit hard. Their impact is better. They hit hard. They have more range. The more range, the more damage you do with a pulse rifle. They suffer from range drop off quite substantially. The aggressive burst pulse rifles, they're good as well. Like this one here, which you can craft. Right? But the rapid fire frames, the 540 RPMs, I am not a fan because they're just water rifles. They don't hit nowhere near hard enough, and they're more... rapid fire frame pulse rifle in Destiny 2 is really a PvP weapon. Hence why I crafted this Peace of Mind ages ago for PvP when I used to play it. Which I don't now, obviously. Barely. So... But this, I'm just showing you this because this does roll with vorpal. You can craft it and get vorpal on it. And I know people are going to run a Peace of Mind with vorpal, but I'm telling you, they're not good enough to run. Even the fact if you get a god roll Peace of Mind, it doesn't matter. It's still a poor gun because the frame's bad. Doesn't hit hard enough. I've got like a Stay Frosty here, but that's not going to be anything because that's a barrier weapon and it's not barrier pulse. So yeah, I can't really recommend much. This is a unique rule. I can't recommend much kinetic pulse rifles apart from Battle Scar and Chatron Bone. So energy pulse rifles, they don't run with kinetic tremors. So a lot of them aren't very good. So I don't recommend any legendary pulse rifle for champion damage, only for ad clear. Now BXR is going to be a big one for people. People are going to automatically say BXR is going to be good. Because it's solar mods, it's solar season, next season and what have you. But I'm here to tell you that it's so overrated, it's unbelievable. When the gun first came out, it felt good, but then they've done some sort of change with it, and then pulse rifles just don't feel like good anyways, legendary ones. So this pulse rifle's just good for planets. It's just good for your base dungeons. It's not good for GMs. It's definitely not good in Grandmaster Nightfalls. If you don't believe me, run it. Last time I run it was in Disgraced, and it done poor. It done really poor, actually. I remember it doing poor. So I've got the best roll you can get on Battler, and it's just not doing it for champion damage. For ad clear, yeah, it'll give you a bit, and it'll give you plenty of nades, but that's not good enough. So it doesn't do the job. But it is a pulse rifle that you can use for ad clear, but don't just rely on that for overload then. Make sure that you run an arc to jolt targets or something. So anyways... Veles-X. This is a good pulse rifle. It's got the right burst. It's got the right frame. This is good on void builds if you're going to be using them. So I can recommend it. It's a ritual weapon type thing, right? It's got repulsor brace, golden tricon. It's a decent-ish roll, and it feels nice when I did use it. But again, it's not good for champion damage. Grid Skipper. This is a roll I kept. It's a rapid fire frame. It's no good. I'm just keeping it for purposes in case rapid fire frames do become good in PvE, which they're not. Adaptive frames, the 390 archetype, again, these are good frames. Alright, adaptive, lightweight frame and aggressive burst and high impact, all those frames are fantastic. This roll isn't that good, it's a good ad clear gun, that's it. Not good for champ damage. Horror's Least. So Horror's Least, rapid fire frame, it was a Nightfall weapon, it's Horror's Least Adept as well, perpetual motion vorpal. It's a good roll, everything's good about it. What's not good about it is the frame, again. don't use rapid fire frames. They just don't do the impact damage that you would hope, even a God Roll 1. So I can't recommend any energy pulse rifles for champions that are in the legendary slot. I just can't. So now we move on to the exotic slot, which is talking about kinetic ones. So there isn't many exotic pulse rifles in the game. There is the Vow of the Disciple exotic pulse, the obligation one, which I'm not going to talk about in the video, but it is rather useful in terms of its playback loop. But I'm not going to mention about it. But the other guns I want to mention and show you the tests on is No Time to Explain, Outbreak Perfected, and Graviton Lance. So I'll talk about the kinetic ones. Remember, kinetic weapons over energy weapons do more damage intrinsically. And if the overcharge mod is on, where you match a surge to your subclass, you get a buff as well. So I'm already favouring exotic pulse rifles over energy ones in general because of that. That's if that overcharge mod works, but even if it doesn't matter, because from what I've discovered today with Outbreak Perfected, it won't really matter anyways. So what you're going to understand is Overlord champions, right, they are weakened to area of effect damage. If your gun has no area of effect damage and it's just doing bullets, then the champ is more likely to teleport out of your stuff, out of your damage. There's no extra stun damage. So No Time to Explain, I mean, it's good because you can get a turret with it. So No Time to Explain, you can reload, it reloads itself, it's got a lot going for it. If you pair it with Arc Souls, you get double turret, Arc Soul turret and standard turret from the catalyst, Blast Aside or whatever it's called. The portal and the Arc Soul. If you then throw a pulse nade, you'll melt the champ because your pulse nade jolts. So that'll be a good way of stunning champions. So I kind of recommend No Time to Explain for that purpose. If you're on an Arc Warlock next season, or an Arc Titan even, because Arc Titan's very strong, and Arc Hunter will be with the Lucky Raspberry, No Time to Explain, I recommend it. It's quite hard. Its Rewind Again perk's very good, and the turret's good as well. So overall, this gun's actually good in PvE. I think it's actually good with the Overload rounds, which the turret's going to help with you for that. So Outbreak Perfected, what you need to understand with Outbreak Perfected is that it's a Sieva weapon, the only Sieva weapon in the game, but the nanites count as Overload rounds to the champion, right? So it's got a lot going for it, but obviously you need Catalyst because they grant additional nanites. So if you don't have Catalyst, it won't be quite as good, but it'll still be good enough to use. So Outbreak Perfected is going to be a top recommendation for Overload, because the corruption and the Sieva are counted as Overload rounds. It's huge, the fact that that's a thing. And there's no kill required. It says rapid hits. It doesn't even say precision hits. It says rapid hits. So you can body shot a champ and still get nanites. Do you understand how good that is? Well, you'll see in the clip coming up. And then we got Graviton Lance. Graviton Lance got a huge buff recently, and it's got Vorpal Weapon, and it's got the exotic buff going for it. So it's got a lot going for it. If you're using a Void build with volatile rounds, then this will probably be best in slot for you. But if you're not using a Void build, I wouldn't recommend that you use Graviton. I would recommend that you use Outbreak Perfected, because Outbreak Perfected works on any build, whereas Graviton Lance only works with Void builds properly. It will work with other things, but not as good. It's just not as effective. Outbreak Perfected does not need a build. The build's in the gun. That is your build. The nanites. So do you see the difference between what I'm saying with that? But that's the information on it. So some tests are going to be done with Child of the Old Gods, and some will be done without. So I'll just put Chaos Accelerant instead. So what I'm going to do for each test is see if the gun can kill a champ within the duration of an Empowering Rift. Because once the Empowering Rift runs out, I lose Overload rounds. Which won't be the case next season. You'll have Overload rounds in your gun. But I'm playing a little mini game. So my game is, can the gun kill a champ on its own within an Empowering Rift, right, with Overload? Because you're going to get Overload in your gun. That's the test for each gun. And I'll be testing it without debuff and with buff. Bonus points if a gun can kill a champion without a debuff. That means it's so strong, it's unbelievable. But if it doesn't, how close did it kill the champ? And then we try it with debuff. How quickly does it kill the champ with debuff in an Empowering Rift? And then just, as I say, a couple of tests for the guns that I recommend, which is Kinetic Pulse Rifles with Kinetic Tremors, and then the exotic Pulse Rifles that you're going to see in the footage. So for the Pulse Rifle test, we're using this Lost Sector Master Champion from Europa because he's easy to test on. And we're basically just going to do the same type of test for every Pulse Rifle. It's all going to be fair. There's no unfavourable surges on like Void Surge or matching surges for kinetic buffs. There's none of that going on. It's just flat buffs and then with debuff. This is Outbreak Perfected with no debuffs. Only a buff of Empowering Rift we need to for Overload Pulse Rifle. So we get a stun. Look how easy the stun is on the champ. He's keeping stunned very easily. Can we kill with no debuff? Like, this will be impressive if we can kill, which we almost do. We get him finishable. So there's high points there for Outbreak Perfected. Right away, we almost kill with no debuff. This is with debuff. So obviously, Outbreak Perfected is going to melt now. So this is already high points for Outbreak. For the nanite damage, the damage he's putting out. For reference, it took me 15 seconds, around about, to kill this champion with only Outbreak Perfected and a debuff and an Empowering Rift. But how is other Pulse Rifles going to be? So this is no time to explain, no debuff. Now remember, Outbreak Perfected almost killed the champ. It got him finishable. Look at the damage difference. So there is a build for no time to explain, but let's look at the damage difference. This is why Outbreak Perfected beats no time to explain. So no debuff, we don't even get him half HP. So that's poor. But there's strengths with no time to explain. So now we'll do a debuff run, right? Showing you that. So remember, Outbreak Perfected without debuff nearly killed the champ. This with debuff should definitely kill the champ within the Empowering Rift timer. We run out an Empowering Rift. Obviously, this wouldn't be the exact case next season because you would have Overload Pulse still. But this is just a good little test to show you how efficient some of these Pulse Rifles are compared to the others. So we don't even kill champ with debuff. That's bad. So now we do the Arc Soul build. So there's no debuff, just Emp Rift, right, with Arc Soul and Turret. Which we get into a third, which is respectable, right? So it's quite respectable, this. So we're going to toss in a Pulse Nade just to show you how sort of good No Time to Explain can be. But you need Pulse Nades with it. That's why you want to use Arc with this. Right, so we get a stun, we get the Pulse Nade in, which it's a little bit of an unfair test because on the Outbreak Perfected one, we didn't even nade. But it just shows you that with the right build on No Time to Explain, it's decent, but it still loses points over Outbreak. So far, it's not as good as Outbreak. So now we go to the next test, which is Graviton Lance, a fan favourite for people. All right, well, let's see how favourite you are about it now after this. No debuff. Graviton Lance. So is it going to do better than Outbreak and No Time to Explain? So the damage is doing decent. I can see that. Right, we're almost half HP, but our Emp Rift's about to run out. So we're going to get the champ to a third HP with no debuff, which is respectable to a point, right? But it's not as efficient as Outbreak. So let's do it with a debuff. Bear in mind, obviously, if you've got volatile rounds, things change. I'm not saying that it wouldn't. So now we've got debuffs. This should definitely kill champ. If it doesn't, I'll be unimpressed. So we're debuffed within the Emp Rift time. We've only got 2 seconds. Emp Rift runs out. But remember, there's a grace period with Overload champs. We get him finishable. So this is the same as a non-debuffed Outbreak. That's insane, right? So now we do with the Kinetic Tremors on Chatter Bone. This is no debuff, by the way, which actually does better than a non-debuffed No Time to Explain. And it competes with almost Graviton Lance, a non-debuff one. So that's insane how good Kinetic Tremors just did there. So let's add a debuff to see how well Chatter Bone will do. Don't remember, it's a legendary. It's not an exotic. So this is a Pulse Rifle I'm definitely going to use if I use an exotic heavy or something. So just look at the damage output we're putting now. So that's what I'm saying about the Kinetic Tremors. So Chatter Bone, it's almost competing with some of the exotic Pulse Rifles, which is insane. But like I said, if you don't have Chatter Bone, then there is an alternative. He was finishable there, the champ. But the alternative is Battle Scar, which isn't quite as good, but it's the same sort of playstyle. And obviously next season you're going to have Overload Pulse, so I would have ended up being able to kill this champ, just not quite as fast as what a Chattering Bone would. So the conclusion is, Outbreak Perfected works with every build. Graviton Lance is to be used if you're using Void builds, but if you're on Solar or something, you're better off just using Outbreak Perfected as a exotic pulse rifle choice. And if it's legendary, then use a Battle Scar or a Chattering Bone. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy. Cheers.